Hey, Giants, welcome to Stretch Revolution. We're going to dive into the journey of unconsciousness. This is the first journey of 12 as you go through Stretch Revolution. So, next week, you're going to get a new journey, and we'll go through another webinar for that. We like to keep these short because it's really about the information. You can come back and watch it as often as you want. But the idea is get that ingrained quickly into you so that you can go right into your journeys and start stretching. And so we're going to dive right into this if that works. Ryan, do you have any thoughts around that?
I'm just so excited to be here. I hope you guys are excited to be here, and I'm excited to listen to Nick go through this journey. And I'll unconsciously drink my protein shake while you talk for just a second.
That works. So these are the 12 journeys. We've got unconscious awareness, grief, acceptance, gratitude. These first components and feeling good are the emotional side of the journey. And so as we handle these, then it sets us up to be able to handle the growth side. So we'll get into that later. So in the journey of unconsciousness, the one thing I want you to commit to is to create agreements in your world. There are things that you're going to do automatically that you're used to doing. As we really step into these journeys, especially these first few, I want you to create agreements, commitments, and tell you the difference between that and integrity. So agreement is what you say you'll do. Commitment is what you do in the world, and integrity is the difference between the two. So when you make an agreement, really have it be something that you step into. Be your word. That's what we're asking for. Commit to it. And we'll know that you're being your word by what shows up in your world. There's nobody here to hold you accountable. Even though you could share in the tribe of giants, it really falls back on you to do this. So the difference between what you say you'll do and what you do in the world shows up as integrity. It's not a shame thing. It's just simply there's a gap in what you say you'll do and what you do.
I feel
And so,
like we should
yeah.
like pinky swear them or Boy Scout salute.
Ready? Let's put it up there.
Everybody pinky swear.
I'll
Here we
put up the
go.
wrong symbol there, you know. So I want you to just read this with me as we go through it. I commit to being my word in all of my actions and thoughts. I commit to cleaning up my mess whenever I'm not being my word. So if you're not your word, go clean it up. And I invite others to lovingly confront me whenever they notice me not being my word. This would be really important. It's all about you just doing what you say you'll do.
So
And
powerful when you start thinking about, like, when you start noticing that stuff too, because you might be unconsciously not being your word.
yeah, it
So as
happens,
you
right?
start to realize, oh wow, those even just little things, little tiny things of being on time, or committing to do something, and you think it's not a big deal. Those little deals become big deals, I
They,
promise.
they add up, right? So when we get into unconsciousness, as we talk about this stage, it's the goal and it's the hindrance. It's the thing in the way and it's the thing we want to create, because everything that we do, or most of what we do, is at an unconscious level. We don't have to think about it anymore. Alfred North Whitehead said that civilization advances by extending the number of important operations which we can perform without thinking of them. And if you think about it, most of what you do is automated. So you get up and you go through your routines, and at the end of the day, a lot of times you don't even remember the day because it was so automatic. It's like driving to work and you don't know how you got there. You experience that?
Regularly.
Yeah, every oh yeah, that's every day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
So
what the surprises you when you get to work or
you're
get
like,
home
oh
from work.
gosh dang it, how did I get here again? Yeah. The beauty of it though is that as a goal, the more you can do without thinking, the more you can do. The challenge is that we have so many things we do without thinking that are unuseful, that kind of keep us from our goals, and that's where we want to wake up to those. But in this journey, we're not going to do anything with these unconscious behaviors, thoughts, or emotions. We're just going to notice them. That's all we're trying to do in this journey. So if you think about your levels of consciousness, there's a conscious level, which is where we're at right now, where you're very aware of what's going on. Things show up in your reality, in your objective reality, your words, behaviors, creations. You're very clear on what they are. You have your pre-conscious, which is before that, and it's just before consciousness. So it's automated to a degree, but you can bring it to consciousness, but you can put it back into automation. So it's in this space where, yeah, it's automatic, but you have some control over it, right? So that's where your beliefs and your values, your fears, pleasures, memories, and identity all hang out, is
Mm,
because you can change those. You can bring them up and move them back into pre-consciousness. Unconsciousness are things that you don't know that you don't know. So this is where the heavy emotions are at, like traumas, neglect, genetics, emotional wounds. These are at a deeper level and they're running, and you don't know they're running necessarily. They're automatic and you're not able to access them easily. And we're going to show you some tools as we go through this entire program that help you bring those to the surface, to the pre-conscious and conscious, so that you can actually do something about them. If you think about your story, so if we go into the pre-conscious world where your identity is, where your beliefs and values are, that's where most of our work will be done, because that's where you're going to create the greatest change in your life. So on this chart here, there's two forms of creation in our world. We have our being form and our doing form. And doing is more external; it's in the objective reality. Being is all the internal stuff, and it starts with our history. History is simply our story, and it's from that story that we establish our values, and then from those values we start to create our beliefs, which are the things that we hold dear, and we act on those. So we start to get an emotional connection with some of the things that we believe, and from that we act and we create habits, and so those create our perceptions of the world. So we start to see the world a certain way, and then we start to predict the world. And the word prediction means to speak before speaking. So it's before speaking, and so we make our predictions from that whole group of things that we value, believe, and have acted on in the past. So we have this remembered presence about our history, and that's what we act on. We see things from there, we speak things from there, and a lot of times what will happen is we'll say our words, we'll speak them into the world. So we take them from that thought and that ethereal into the world, and then often those become the foundation for our actions. And so when we believe in something, we'll speak it. When we believe it, we'll act on it or not act on it. And then we create results, and those confirm or deny our perceptions. As we repeat those, they become our habits, which feeds into our story and establishes our values and beliefs. So it's this cycle that just continues through. There's
mhm.
some thoughts around that, Ryan?
I've been there, done that
Yeah,
on
yeah.
all of those things.
You're like, hey, that's me.
Hey.
In fact, that's an actual picture of my brain. How did you get
Yeah,
that?
that's happening
Right?
right now.
Yeah. The beauty of it is that the brain is very creative. So when you have a way of seeing the world, you can see whatever you choose to see. This is a cool study from Cambridge University. I'll just give you a
That's
minute to look
wild.
at that.
It's a wild study. I love
S-
that study.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? Like
Huh.
your brain fills in the gaps. Your brain takes your values and beliefs, sees the world, and if there are any gaps that are out of alignment with what you believe and perceive, it will fill in the gaps. And this is just a small example of that. There are other ways that we do it too. In our vision, we fill in the gap between the space between our eyes. You know, right here, this little gap. There's actually a dark spot right there that we can't see, but the brain fills it in. So you'd never know. But visually, there's no way for you to see right in this middle area, but your brain fills it in. So the cool thing and the crazy thing is that your brain is very adept at filling in the gaps on whatever you value and whatever you believe in. And then that confirms your story and your words and everything that you do in your world. Does that make sense?
100%.
A lot of times what happens is that, well, not a lot of times, like what happens is we're born into a culture, right? We're born into a family, we're born into a society, and this image kind of outlines how our values are created. So initially when we're born into the family, they've got to teach us how to operate within that world. So they teach us what they know. Sometimes that's really chaotic, and some people don't get taught what they know. Instead they experience trauma. And either way, you are handed these cultural values as your foundation. These are the things we hold as important, right? And then from that, you establish your own values. So if you look at this tree down below, you have your cultural values, which are deeply rooted. And then you have your own values that you build on top of that generally. And if you look at the brain is an artifact of culture. If you think about this, Lisa Feldman Barrett describes it as that. It's an artifact. So if somebody were to create a statue and you could look at it as an artifact from a civilization years ago, you would see that statue. Our brains are that for our culture. They're molded and shaped and created around what's going on around us. And so they become that artifact of where we live, our environment. But
Hmm.
then we still have this chance to change the values, and that's a process of looking at it within ourselves at what's important to us. So when we know what our values are, and it's different for different people, but there's some common values around the world. They value relationship, they value time, they value money. Depending on those values, then you start to create beliefs. Now, values are things that are important. Beliefs are things you hold dear, like operating systems. So they're usually tied to thoughts right here, and you have 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. As of this video, I'm 47 years old. I've had over 850 million thoughts in my lifetime so far, and I'm halfway there. So I'll have over 1 billion thoughts by the end of my lifetime. So thoughts create and trigger emotions in the world, and that becomes your affect. So your emotions bleed out from you into the world, and other people's emotions come in and hit you, if that makes sense. And so when somebody else's emotions hit you, that affect, then you gauge them against your beliefs, your values, and your perceptions. And these perceptions either block those out. So if somebody has an external view or an emotion that hits you, you either block it out or you allow it in, depending on your beliefs and values. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Tell me if I'm losing you, because if I am, I'll.
No, sometimes you have like a stronger SPF to block those out, or not,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
sometimes you absorb them and you're like, oh,
yeah.
heavy emotions, and then you do like that. Those judgments, those all the are based on all of those thoughts, beliefs, values, culture.
You got to rub some of that SPF all over you, right? Like that sensory perception filter.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, notice somebody will say something to you, and then you have this huge amount of resistance come up, and it's because it's out of alignment with what you believe and value.
Hmm.
And then there's thoughts that come up and emotions that come up that go back to them or back into the world. A lot of times that'll show up as anger, as a reaction, rather than an action. And so it's really just this game of external events are coming in. Internally, we have internal events going on, and our perceptions act as blocks. So whatever we value and believe become our perceptions. And from that, we either allow or we block those events from affecting us. So all of this, like if this were a tree, if we were a tree, right, our values, beliefs, and thoughts kind of impact our purpose, our behaviors and words, and then that's what shows up in the world. So it becomes our creation, our reality. So if you believe the world is a bad place to live, you start to experience that in the world. It becomes your reality. So this little sheet, I'll just leave this up for a second so you can see it. You might come back to this and pause on this page. But these events are just neutral occurrences. Events don't have meaning, but what we do is we give them meaning. So we take our perceptions and we add a meaning to an event in our lives. Somebody could walk up to you, Ryan, punch you right in the face, and it could mean nothing, right?
I'm like,
I hope they
who
don't.
would do that?
Who would, what kind of people are we? What?
That means nothing to me.
Yeah. Well, somebody shared a long time ago, so you're walking down the street and you say hi to somebody and they don't say hi back. What does it mean? What would that mean to you,
It
Ryan?
means whatever you think it means.
You've got this. You've been through this too many
Oh.
times. Yeah.
Did I
Well,
skip to the end already?
God dang it. Well, okay, guys, that's a wrap. That's the webinar.
And that's our show.
Yeah. So, yeah, whatever you want it to mean, it's an event. It's an event. It truly, somebody comes in and yells at you. What does it mean? Truly, whatever you want it to mean. And it all depends on your perceptions. So when somebody comes in and their emotions hit you, that's called affect. So affect is other people's emotion hitting you. Attention is simply what you give your perception to. your thoughts to, your values to, your beliefs to, your actions to. That's attention. Whatever you give attention to grows. Whether it's positive or negative, the brain is so neutral it doesn't care. Whatever you give your attention to is going to grow. And then thoughts, you have 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. I mean, that's a ridiculous amount of thoughts. And so, if you want to really dive into what thoughts are creating my world, you're going to have a hell of a job in front of you. I mean, truthfully, at 47, I've had 850 million thoughts so far. Which one of those was the one that created my reality? I don't really want to sift through that. That's a lot. I'd rather just
That's a
create
lot.
it with new thoughts and beliefs. Did something come up on that?
Just that that's a lot of thoughts, and like I feel the anxiety and overwhelm if I'm trying truly if I'm start thinking about my thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa,
Yeah, the
like where
thoughts
where do I
about your
even begin? How
thoughts.
do I tackle that? I could see where people get stuck and
Yeah.
overwhelmed because it triggers all kinds of things, at least for me.
It does. And if you think about it, beliefs kind of make thoughts efficient. So beliefs are maybe clusters of thoughts tied to emotion. So you have these experiences. Experiences are simply the meanings that you gave to events. And so you have their memories, right? So you have these experiences, and then they have emotion attached to them, which cause the neural wiring. And now they become an operating system so that you know what to act on and what not to act on. They're clusters of thoughts, and they're tied all over the place to things that you've experienced that you said this has meaning. And so it helps you know what to act on and what to pay attention to, and what to see in the world. And so we all have them, but they're really that operating system that gets you moving or not moving. And then
Hmm.
you go into your values, and values are simply the things that are important to you. Like I value family, I value time with my kids. So my beliefs are established like from that. So if I value my family, then I'm going to have some beliefs that say you do this when you're around family. I'm going to have thoughts that support that as well. And then purpose is simply your place to rest. A purpose, as the word means, to propose, to move forward, to rest. It's a resting stop. And so a purpose is simply a place that when you get there, you'll take a little break and then you'll get back into it. And purpose is your creations, your intentions, your goals, your hopes, your visions. Like purpose is what gets you out of bed and moving every day. And it can be anything. So
Hmm.
if you think about the capacity of the brain, we have 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. There are nearly 100 trillion atoms in the human body. Just actually 100 trillion atoms in the human brain, 700 trillion synaptic connections in the brain. And I'll go over what the synapse is and how that works. You can store 1 million gig of information in your brain. That's 3 million hours of TV. It would take you 300 years straight to watch that much TV 24/7. Like the capacity of the human brain is incredible. Like,
I know some of you have tried to
right?
like to watch that much TV.
Or one season of Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
binge watched
Binge watch that. Or
back to back
what's the
to
newest
back.
one? Yellowstone. Everybody's on Yellowstone as of this one. So that'll date this. Like 10 years from now, when you're watching this video, you'll be like, what the hell
They're
is
so
Yellowstone?
old.
They're so old. Kevin Costner. Yeah. So you have limitless capacity. So think of the automations. If there are that many connections and that many neurons going on, the brain wires for efficiency, because otherwise the cost to continually consciously do something would be too much. You wouldn't be able to handle it. You wouldn't get anything done. Just the brain produces a ton of energy. It actually produces enough energy to fire a light bulb, a 20-watt light bulb. There's enough energy coming off of it that you could light up a light bulb. It's crazy. So in your brain, you have 86 billion neurons and you have 85 billion glial cells. So I'm going to explain what these are. So the neurons, these are the connections. They're cells that connect one cell to the next. They fire in one direction. They create all the thoughts, behaviors, emotions that we experience. They're affected emotionally. Emotions come from the chemicals that are released in the body that these neurons receive and then fire or don't fire based on those chemicals. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Tell me if I'm losing you here, because this is where it
Oh,
really gets into the nerdy
just
gritty or
the
nitty
nerdy
gritty.
gritty. It's
I'm gonna
not
make
nitty
that
gritty,
up.
it's nerdy gritty.
It's the nerdy gritty. So each synapse, if you think about this, has 1,000 synaptic connections per neuron. That's a lot. So that's where you have trillions of synaptic connections. There's limitless capacity in your brain. Really, there's no reason you couldn't learn anything. The brain is plastic. What they say with plasticity is the idea that it can continually create new neural pathways for your entire life that never goes away. Also, it never stops producing new neural connections.
Mhm.
So you're constantly evolving. And so if we sit there and tell ourselves the story, going back to the brain, that I can't do something, that becomes a belief. So you don't do something, and that becomes your reality. And then you create this perception that says, well, yeah, I'm the type of person that doesn't do anything. And then that confirms your story. And then it goes into your values. Yeah, I value not doing things. Right. And then you have the beliefs that say that. And then you predict that, and you perceive that, and you speak that, and you act on that. And that's what shows up as your reality. And it's all automated. Like, you're just doing it. And the
Mhm.
reason it's automated is the brain doesn't care if you're conscious of it or not, whether it serves you or not. Its whole purpose is that when something happens and we use it over and over again, we're going to make it automatic so that you don't have to put energy into it, so that you can be efficient and pay attention to this world out here. And so the way that it does that is with what are called glial cells or glial cells, glue cells. They used to call them glue cells because they thought that all that they did was hold the neurons in place. They didn't realize how much they actually do. But you have as many of these cells, these support cells, as you do neurons in the brain. And so glial cells, what they do is they go in and they anchor in the neurons and hold them in place. So they do that. But you get into the oligodendrocytes that go in and wrap the neuron with a myelin sheath. What that does is it causes it to fire faster and faster. So it's easier and easier. You don't have to think about it, because the more it wraps it with myelin, the more automatic it becomes, then the faster it fires. Then you go into the astrocytes that wrap the ends of the dendrites on the synaptic connections and make them efficient so chemicals aren't lost. So it makes that connection more efficient, and it holds the structure in place. And then you have these microglia that go around and they clean everything up, because you can't have enzymes in the brain. What they do is they break down material in the brain, clear it out into the spinal fluid, which flushes every day, and then that goes down into the body where it can be digested and released out. So at night, when you're sleeping, your brain is cleaning up the low level brain damage of the day, consolidating, creating. That's why at night, when you go to sleep with a meditation, or like what we're doing with the meditations that you receive with this program, is that the brain is consolidating and bringing that information in and pulling it in and starting new neural connections and anchoring those in. So the next day when you wake up, you're ready to go. All that brain damage has been cleaned up. Did that make sense? A
Yeah,
little
it's
bit?
interesting because yeah, I hear people say, "Well, I don't have the brain for that,"
Mm,
or I've heard you talk about a story of a guy with half a brain.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe you could mention that real quick, or I'm not Einstein.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm not Einstein, right? No, I can't do that. Well, Einstein's brain was the same as yours and mine. The only difference is he plugged in so much information that his glial cells in the neocortex, where you store and draw up information. So his hippocampi and his neocortex, which are the areas of storage and retrieval, were larger than most humans. And it's not because we can't do that. It's just because he practiced so much that those areas were larger. London cab drivers do the same thing. So in London, they have to learn the entire map, and not only learn the map, they're tested over a period of time on all of the possibilities for making it through London. And it's a chaotic map system. So when they measured their hippocampi, their brains in those areas were larger than most humans. When they compared them to the bus drivers of London, theirs were smaller because they didn't have to push themselves to memorize all these differences, all these different pathways.
Because they took the same route every day.
Yeah, and so when you do that, there's no need to store all that information. So the brain's about efficiency. If I don't need it, I'm going to just go ahead and shrink it, eliminate it, or not use it, right? But if you think about our negative emotions or negative behaviors, it's like we use them so consistently. The brain's like, yeah, I got to support you. I got to support you because you're bringing it up so consistently. You're stepping into it so consistently. It becomes automated. The brain doesn't care. It's like, I'm going to support you. I love you, man. I'm going to support you. And you're like, dude, this is screwing up our life. It's like not really ideal. But going into
Hell, you're a hell of a friend,
you're a
brain.
hell of a friend. Hey, man, I'm an enabler. Your brain's like the ultimate enabler. It's like, hey, yeah, you want to become an alcoholic? Sure, we got
I
this.
got you.
We got you. Right. Well, so the girl with the half a brain, at 3 years old, she started experiencing seizures and would just shut down. She'd fall down and they couldn't figure out what was going on. They went to hospital after hospital. Finally, Johns Hopkins found her or got a hold of her and did some studies. And they found that her right side of her brain was attacking itself. It was an autoimmune disease and it was eating itself, it was consuming itself. And so they did what was called a hemispherectomy. They cut out a half of her brain. They removed it completely. And so the seizures stopped, thankfully. So that stopped the seizures. The left side of the brain took over the functions of the right side of the brain completely. Everything from walking to speaking to learning, all of it took over it all. The other side of the brain filled up with cerebral spinal fluid, so it filled up so she had something in there. But the left hemisphere took over, and she grew up with a fairly normal life. A little bit of a limp from the surgery. But outside of that, she went on to graduate college, got married, had a very impactful life with half a brain, right? There is
Wow.
no excuse, really. The thing that happens is that our beliefs and values get in the way, and then we start to tell ourselves why we can't do something, and then we start to believe that and act on that. That becomes our reality and our automation. And automation is the goal, and it's also the problem. So that automation keeps us from changing our world, and we could create a new automation, right? William James, he said, we must make automatic and habitual as early as possible as many useful actions as we can. The more the details of our daily life we can hand over to the effortless custody of automatism, is a weird word.
You say that 5 times
Yeah,
fast.
right. The
Probably
more
been
our
swearing.
higher powers of mind will be set free for their own proper work. They spoke different back then, William
Yeah.
James. Yeah. But we do. That's our goal, is automation. And truthfully, there's no way to change it if you're not aware of it. So in this course, our goal is not only automation of the useful things, but awareness of the things that are not. And truthfully, over time, you create habits. Habits take, on average, 66 days to establish a new habit. So you really have to stick with something long enough to get good at it. And most of us will try it out. We'll test it for a few days. We're like, yeah, this doesn't work. I'm not doing it. And then we go back to our old routines. And so you've really got to give it time. And so this week, our vision for you is not to do anything with your unuseful thoughts. So, unuseful thoughts, behaviors, beliefs, perceptions, values, we don't want you to necessarily change them in this journey. So, this week, your goal is to just be aware of them, to write them down, to journal them. Don't do anything with them. So, I hope you can hear me on this. You've got to let them be what they are. So, your goal is to just document them. Oh, yeah, I do this without thinking. So you'll see in the journey, your stretch is to document all the things that you do without thinking, useful, unuseful, and really start to pay attention to what's working and what's not working in your life. Now, I know what you'll do with your brain. You'll go right into judgment. We'll talk about that next week. But what I want you to do is just create some awareness of all of the things that you do without thinking. You do more than you know. If you have an idea of this, I work with people that they own businesses and they don't document or share with other people how to do all the stuff. In here, they've got this massive amount of information. And then when you go to start to offload that from their mind, you're like, oh my gosh, dude, you do this and this and this and this and this. And it becomes overwhelming, but they've built themselves over time to do those things automatically. So when it comes to teaching somebody else, they've held it in. It's an overwhelming job to bring that much information out into the reality so that somebody else can do it. But we're not trying to change your life drastically in a day. What we're trying to do is create behaviors and thoughts that move your life into new values, new beliefs, new perceptions over time.
That's why it's called stretch revolution. Because like when you stretch, like if you're reaching down to try to touch your toes right now, like I'm a ways from touching my toes, but I
Yeah.
could do a little bit every day and stretch, 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 and pretty soon, over
Yeah.
time, I'll be able to touch my toes. Hopefully.
Maybe I might be one of those guys that never, hey, that's a
Yeah,
belief right there. If I believe it, then I won't act on it.
yeah.
Easy enough.
It's like a millimeter or two
Yeah.
every day. That's the official sign for
That
trying to
I
reach
think
your toes.
I think that's how it moves. Like, hey guys, what are you doing? I'm moving my toes. Guys, go make it a giant day. Stretch. Yeah, stretch today. Stretch when it comes to your unconsciousness. Really lean into this entire week. Lean into your unconsciousness. Recognize it. Recognize the power and the value of it. And then also recognize the things that aren't serving you, that aren't useful to you, because they're there. That's what's operating in your world. It's nobody out here. It's what's going on inside of here that matters.
Yeah,
And
go grab a piece of paper right now and start doing that, because maybe one of your habits is to put things off
yeah,
that you're not conscious to. So maybe now you are. So go grab a piece of paper and a pencil and or a
I'm glad
pen,
you said that. Yeah,
and boom.
you're like I have the perception that I'll do this later. It'll be fine. Yeah, don't do that.
If that's you, go rewatch this again
Yeah, right.
and grab a piece of paper and pencil before you start.
That's amazing. All right, man. Any other thoughts before we finalize?
I'm excited to see you guys grow, Giants. It'll be awesome. So,
Yeah,
and this is something that you can go back to over and over and over again, because it takes some time, and be gentle with yourself as you're doing this stuff. It's okay.
yeah.
It is what it is up to this point. So we'll get into some more of these things, some more stuff.
This first half, the first 6 journeys, I've had people swear at me through this journey. I've had people call up and like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. Like, this is the hard work. If we don't get this part done, in the words of Steve Hardison, we're just frosting dog poop. That's all we're doing. Like, you're putting a mask on stuff that's broken. Is we got to do this work, because this is the foundation for everything else that follows. So yeah, the first 6 journeys are pretty intense, and then we'll get into the growth aspect. But this smallness right here, where we grow through the smallness, is really, really important, really foundational to everything else that comes. So go make it a giant day. Thanks for being a part of this journey. We'll see you in the next journey. And
Love you
yeah,
too.
take care.